And there was an outburst in the courtroom this morning as closing arguments were being heard in the triple murder trial of a member of the Hells Angel Motorcycle Club.
The Hells Angels are infamous for their outlaw lifestyle, but some members stand out as the most dangerous figures in the club's history. These 13 individuals left a significant footprint of chaos, fear, and violence.
The Hells Angels is a criminal gang under state law. Now that means a court case involving a freeway shooting.
From ruthless enforcers to cunning masterminds, their stories reveal the darker side of this notorious gang. Who are they, and what made them so feared? Join us as we uncover the chilling legacies of these Hells Angels. Number 13. Nurget.
16 members of the Hells Angels are facing federal charges.
Walterstadnik may have been only 5 feet 4 inches tall, but his name became linked to a bloody path of violence that led to the loss of over 150 lives. Born Walterstadnik on August 3, 1952, in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, he grew up in a working-class neighborhood. Despite being smart, he was also rebellious. As a teenager, he was known for selling drugs at his high school, earning the nickname Nurget, though no one knows exactly why. His early years of petty crime paved the way for his future in organized crime. In the late 1960s, Stadnik joined the Cossacks, a local biker gang in Hamilton, and quickly gained a reputation. By the late 1970s, he had moved on to the Wild Ones Motorcycle Club in Montreal. But it was his connection to the Hells Angels that truly made him a key figure in Canada's biker world. He joined their Montreal chapter in 1982 and quickly rose through the ranks because of his sharp planning skills and ability to form alliances. Stadnik played a major role in spreading the Hells Angels' power across Canada. He helped set up chapters nationwide, turning the club into the most powerful outlaw biker gang in the country. His leadership saw violent turf wars, including the brutal Quebec Biker War in the 1990s, where rival gangs fought over territories. In 2004, the law finally caught up with him. He was convicted of conspiracy to end lives, illicit substance trafficking, and gangsterism, leading to a 20-year prison sentence. His arrest was a huge hit to the Hells Angels in Canada, showing how far law enforcement had reached into organized crime. After serving part of his sentence, Stadnik was released on parole in 2014. Since then, he has stayed out of the spotlight, and little is known about what he does now. If Stadnik's bloody tactics left you shaken, wait until you hear about David Carroll, whose disappearance only added to his chilling legacy. Number 12. Wolf. David Wolf. Carroll grew up in a working-class family in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, Canada, and had an ordinary childhood. But as a teenager, he was drawn to the biker world, attracted by the sense of brotherhood and rebellion. Over time, his small crimes turned into more serious ones, leading him deeper into organized crime. In the early 1980s, Carroll joined the Hells Angels, becoming part of the Halifax chapter. His sharp mind and strategic thinking made him stand out, and by the mid-1990s, he had climbed to the elite Nomads chapter in Quebec. During his time with the Hells Angels, he played a major role in the Quebec Biker War, a violent battle between the Hells Angels and the Rock Machine over territories from 1994 to 2002. In this war, there were cases of bombings, shootings, and the loss of a lot of lives, and Carroll was named as the strategist who had planned most of these attacks. His criminal record includes a conviction in 1986 for living off the earnings of trafficking, which led to a 1-year prison sentence. In March 2001, with 13 counts for taking people's lives, Carroll disappeared. He was last seen in Ixtapa, Mexico. Despite worldwide efforts to find him, including an Interpol red notice, he has never been caught. Some believe he may have escaped to countries like Brazil or Australia, where the Hells Angels have a strong presence, but no proof has ever surfaced. Today, David Wolf Carroll remains a fugitive. His disappearance is one of the biggest mysteries in organized crime, showing how hard it can be to catch high-ranking criminals. Whether he is alive or dead is unknown, but law enforcement continues to search for any clues about his fate. His life is a reminder of the dangers of the outlaw biker world and the extremes criminals will go to avoid justice. If you thought David Carroll was ruthless, Brace yourself because the next Hells Angel we are about to reveal redefined fear itself in the world of the Hells Angels. Number 11. Mom. Born on June 21, 1953, in Coursecal, Quebec, Canada, Maurice Mom Boucher grew up in a poor family that struggled to get by. As a young man, he was drawn to the tough streets of Montreal, where crime seemed like his only way out. He started with small thefts and drug use, but over time his crimes became more serious. Boucher joined the Hells Angels in the early 1980s, becoming part of the Montreal chapter. He quickly earned a reputation for being fearless and ruthless, which helped him rise through the ranks. By the mid-1990s, he became the leader of the Quebec Nomads, an elite branch of the Hells Angels. Under his leadership, the gang expanded its control over substance trafficking, extortion, and a brutal war against a rival gang, the Rock Machine. This conflict, known as the Quebec Biker War, was a bloody battle for control of the drug trade. It involved bombings, shootings, and the loss of lives. In 1997, Boucher made headlines when he ordered the hit on 2 prison guards to send a message to law enforcement.
Boucher was the head of an elite chapter of the Hells Angels. Everyone knew Mom Boucher was a killer, and he knew everyone knew.
His reign of terror ended in 2002 when he was convicted of taking people's lives and sentenced to life in prison without parole for 25 years. While behind bars, his health worsened, and he battled cancer. On July 20th, 2022, Maurice Mom Boucher died at the age of 69 from throat cancer. Boucher remains one of the most infamous figures in Canadian biker history. He is remembered as a ruthless leader and a symbol of the violent and lawless world of outlaw biker gangs. Now, moving on, let's dive into the story of another man who became powerful in the Hells Angels by taking things to a whole new level. Who is this man? Well, let's find out. Number 10. The Mad Bomber. In the late 1960s, Yves Apache Trudeau joined the Popeye Motorcycle Club, which later became part of the Hells Angels in Quebec. By 1977, he was one of the founding members of the Hells Angels Quebec chapter and quickly gained a reputation as a ruthless enforcer. Trudeau started out working at a chemical company, but found the job boring. Seeking more excitement, he fully embraced the dangerous world of the Hells Angels, becoming one of their most feared and violent members. He was deeply involved in several biker wars, including conflicts with the Devil's Disciples and Satan's Choice. He was especially known for using bombs and guns to take out rivals, earning him the nickname the Mad Bomber. His brutal methods left a long trail of deaths behind him. By 1985, Trudeau was addicted to drugs and had a warrant on his head from his gang. Fearing for his life, he became a witness for the Crown. He admitted to taking the lives of 43 people between 1973 and 1985 and pleaded guilty to manslaughter. In return, he got a life sentence but was eligible for parole after 7 years. In 1994, he was released and given a new identity, Denis Coté. However, he couldn't stay out of trouble and was convicted of assault in 2004. Trudeau passed away from cancer in July 2008. Although Yves Apache Trudeau's violent rise through the ranks of the Hells Angels left a trail of destruction, his story pales in comparison to the legacy of the next Hell Angel we are about to reveal. Number 9. Sonny Barger. Ralph Hubert Sonny Barger Jr. was among the most well-known figures in outlaw biker history.
Sonny Barger was the founding member of the Hells Angels Oakland chapter.
Growing up in a tough neighborhood in Oakland, California, he was surrounded by crime and rebellion from a young age. At 19, he founded the Oakland chapter of the Hells Angels in 1957, helping to turn it into one of the most feared and powerful biker clubs in the world. Sonny Barger was more than just a member. He was a leader. He brought order to the wild world of outlaw bikers, uniting different chapters and expanding the club across North America and Europe. His strong leadership and hunger for power made him both respected and feared within the club. His rise, however, was anything but peaceful. Barger was deeply involved in crime, especially drug trafficking. In 1974, he was convicted of running an illicit drug network and sent to federal prison. He was also caught up in violent battles with rival gangs. In 1988, he was convicted for plotting to bomb the clubhouse of the Outlaws Motorcycle Club, part of a long-running turf war. Though he was cleared of being involved in the hit on someone in 1972, his violent nature was well known. Over the years, he was also convicted of racketeering and other crimes. Despite his criminal past, Barger became a public figure. He wrote 5 books about his life as a biker and even appeared in the TV show Sons of Anarchy, playing a version of himself. This role made him a celebrity, further cementing his image in popular culture.
I mean, it wasn't founded prior to that. I was one of the original Oakland members.
Barger's legacy is complicated. His leadership made the Hells Angels a dominant force, but his name was also tied to violence and crime. Even as his health declined, he remained a symbol of the outlaw biker lifestyle. He passed away on June 29, 2022, at 83, marking the end of an era. Though he is gone, the impact of his leadership and the fear he inspired still linger. Moving on from his era, let's enter the chilling world of Adam Lee Hall, whose violent actions took the club's criminal activities to an even darker place. Number 8. Adam Lee Hall. This name is tied to one of the most brutal crimes in recent Hells Angels history. Growing up in a tough environment, Hall was drawn to crime early on. His path eventually led him to the notorious Hells Angels Motorcycle Club, where he became a key member of the Springfield, Massachusetts chapter. Hall was involved in many crimes, but the one that made him infamous was a shocking triple hit in 2011. The victims, David Glasser, Edward Frampton, and Robert Chadwell, were taken out after Hall, and his gang suspected them of being informants. The men were shot and dismembered, and their remains were dumped in the woods, making the crime even more horrifying. Hall's planning and execution of the hits showed a level of cruelty that shocked even hardened criminals. After a long investigation, Hall was arrested in 2013. His 2014 trial revealed the full extent of his violent nature.
Were murdered in Pittsfield. The judge is now taking the stand, and so let's listen in to Hamden Superior Court.
He was convicted of all 3 crimes against life and sentenced to life in prison without parole. His actions were driven by loyalty to the Hells Angels and a ruthless need to silence anyone who threatened the club's secrecy. Well, let's move on from this brutal chapter of Adam Lee Hall and talk about another Hell Angel who left a deadly mark on the world, David Giles. Number 7. David Giles. This notorious Hells Angels member was born in eastern Canada and became well known for helping start the Kelowna chapter of the Hells Angels in British Columbia. He had strong ties to Maurice Mom Boucher. For years he had been able to evade the law, but in 2017 he was convicted of serious substance crimes, including planning to bring illegal drugs into Canada and selling them. He was caught in a secret police operation that took him from Kelowna to Panama. Giles was one of 5 men on trial after an undercover RCMP sting in 2012. Police officers pretended to be members of a South American drug cartel and met with Giles in Vancouver, Panama City, and other locations. During these meetings, Giles told them he was struggling financially after fighting previous charges and was trying to recover. Eventually, Giles and another man handed over $4 million in exchange for what they believed to be 500 kilograms of cocaine. However, most of the drugs were fake. Only 1 kilogram was real, and it contained a tracking device. The cocaine was placed inside duffel bags in a Martha Stewart box. During the trial, it was revealed that Giles unknowingly gave the undercover officers details about Hells Angels activities. He mentioned that any side business had to be approved by 3 senior members. However, he struggled to introduce the officers to other gang members because they feared getting caught under Canadian conspiracy laws. The logistics of the drug deal were also complicated. At one point, Giles delivered $2 million in wet bills. When asked why the money was soaked, he laughed and said it had been buried, but a broken lid let in rainwater. Giles had been found not guilty in 2008 in another major drug case. However, this time, he was convicted and sentenced to over 11 years in prison, one of the longest sentences given to a Hells Angels member in British Columbia. He did not serve his full sentence. On July 1, 2017, Giles passed away at the age of 67 in Abbotsford Regional Hospital. The cause of his death was never made public. Next up is a man whose criminal empire within the club shattered lives and pushed the limits of violence. What drove him to commit such heinous acts? Let's uncover the chilling truth about this man. Number 6. Diamond Dan. Daniel Diamond Dan Byfield was once a feared and powerful figure in the world of outlaw motorcycle clubs. Born and raised in the rough streets of New Jersey, he was drawn to crime and rebellion from an early age. This path led him to the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club, where he climbed the ranks to become a leader. Byfield had a long history of crime, including trafficking and violent offenses. As a high-ranking member and former president of the New Jersey chapter, he played a key role in expanding the club's influence. However, his leadership was also marked by brutal conflicts with rival biker groups. He became deeply involved in substance trafficking, moving large shipments across state lines. His ability to avoid law enforcement for years made him both feared and respected within the club. However, his reputation for violence eventually put him on law enforcement's radar, leading to multiple arrests. By the early 2000s, authorities began cracking down on his operations. He was arrested and sentenced to several years in prison for trafficking and other crimes. Though his current status is unclear, he is believed to still be behind bars. His downfall marked the end of an era for the Hells Angels in New Jersey. Now, let's focus on an early member whose brutal confrontations and criminal activities would leave an indelible mark on the club's history. What pushed him to become such a feared figure? Let's find out. Number 5. The Snake. Thomas "Tommy" Karate Patera was born on March 15, 1958, in Brooklyn, New York, where he grew up in a tough neighborhood filled with crime and violence. Drawn to the criminal world at an early age, he joined the Hells Angels in the late 1970s, beginning a brutal and bloody career that made him one of the club's most feared figures. Patera quickly rose through the ranks, known for his ruthless and violent ways. He dealt harshly with rival gangs and never hesitated to use extreme force to protect the club's interests. His most infamous crimes were a series of cold-blooded hits, many carried out with chilling precision. He was feared for his brutality, often dismembering his victims to send a message. He was eventually nicknamed the Snake, thanks to his calculated and merciless nature. During the 1980s and 1990s, Patera became deeply involved in trafficking and smuggling illicit drugs into the U.S. He worked closely with the Gambino crime family, making millions for the Hells Angels and strengthening his influence within the club. His reign of terror ended in 1992 when federal agents arrested him. Convicted for taking multiple lives, trafficking illicit crimes, and other serious crimes, he was sentenced to life in prison without parole in 1994. Despite his imprisonment, Patera's name remains infamous in the world of organized crime. Now, the next name on our list shows how far someone can go in the world of violence when driven by personal vendettas. Ready to dive into the chilling tale of his infamous crime? All right, it's time for our subscriber pick. Looking at this image, you might be wondering, are the Hells Angels still around? The answer is yes, they haven't disappeared. In fact, some members have recently made headlines, facing serious criminal charges in court. The law might be closing in, but that doesn't mean they've backed down. If you take a good look at them, tattoos, tough expressions, you can tell they've been through a lot, and they're not sorry for it. But here's the real question. Are they still the same dangerous outlaw gang they used to be? Or are they just a symbol of organized crime's rough past? Let us know what you think in the comments. Number 4. Alan Pasaro. Alan Pasaro will always be remembered for one of the most shocking moments in Hells Angels history. A member of the San Francisco chapter, his name is tied to a brutal event, taking the life of Meredith Hunter at the Altamont Free concert in 1969. The concert, headlined by the Rolling Stones, was meant to be a celebration of music and peace, but chaos took over when the Hells Angels were hired as security. In front of thousands of people, Pasaro fatally wounded Hunter, who was allegedly holding a gun. The attack became one of the most infamous acts of violence linked to the Hells Angels. Despite the clear evidence, Pasaro was found not guilty of this crime in 1971. The court ruled that he acted in self-defense, believing Hunter was a threat. But even though he avoided prison, his reputation was forever tied to the event. His actions that day showed the extreme violence the Hells Angels were willing to use to protect their club. After the incident, he stayed with the Hells Angels for a while, but little is known about Pasaro's later years. His ability to beat the law and his tough reputation made him a legend among young men looking for trouble. Many saw him as proof that the gang was untouchable, and some wanted to follow in his footsteps. Among those who joined then is the next person on our list, and not only did he become a member, he climbed the ranks, earned respect and became one of the gang's most feared leaders. Number 3. Jethro. Born in the early 1960s, Jethro Pettigrew quickly became known within the Hells Angels, especially in the San Jose, California chapter. Before joining the club, Pettigrew had a long history of trouble with the law, but his crimes grew worse once he became a member of the Hells Angels. He got involved in illegal activities like substance trafficking, violent assaults, and racketeering. Pettigrew became a feared enforcer, helping to control the club's territory and operations. His violent behavior earned him a bad reputation, not only among rival gangs, but also in the criminal world in California. His most infamous moment came in 2011 during a violent encounter with a Mongols motorcycle club member at a Nevada casino. Pettigrew, reportedly armed with a gun, shot and took out a Mongols member, sparking a deadly rivalry between the two clubs. Sadly, Pettigrew's life ended in September 2011 when he was shot outside a casino in Sparks, Nevada. It was believed to be revenge for the earlier killing, escalating the feud between the Hells Angels and Mongols. Pettigrew's death ended his violent reign, but his actions remain a dark part of the Hells Angels' history. Since the beginning of our list, we've focused on the loud, violent, and ruthless members who made their mark through chaos. But what about a member who kept a relatively low profile, yet wielded just as much power and influence? Number 2. George Christie. George Christie is a name closely tied to the Hells Angels, known for both his leadership and his role in some of the club's darkest moments. Born on March 26, 1947 in California, Christie grew up with a rebellious spirit and a strong attraction to outlaw motorcycle gangs. In 1971, he joined the Hells Angels' Venice, California chapter.
I never went to war as a Marine. I went to war here in Southern California as a Hells Angel.
Starting his long and controversial career within the club. By the 1980s, Christie had risen to become the president of the Ventura, California chapter. This important position made him a well-known figure in the club. Christie's leadership was marked by his loyalty to the Hells Angels and his harsh methods of protecting the club's interests. He played a key role in the club's growth and its illegal activities, like trafficking, violence, and arms smuggling. His time as president saw growing conflicts with rival gangs, such as the Mongols and the Outlaws, often leading to violent clashes. But his time with the Hells Angels wasn't just about crime. It was also about the brotherhood and the code of silence that the club followed. Christie was a charismatic leader, skilled at keeping order within the club, even as they faced more attention from law enforcement and the media. Although Christie wasn't directly involved in much violence, his leadership and connections were powerful. In the early 2010s, after more than 40 years with the Hells Angels, George Christie left the club. His departure stirred some controversy, but he later shared his story through interviews and his book Exile on Front Street. Since leaving the Hells Angels, Christie has focused on public speaking and writing, giving a rare insight into the world of outlaw bikers. Now let's end our list as we focus on the life of yet another infamous member whose story shook the Hells Angels to its core. Number 1. Sonny. Ralph Sonny. Radke's early life remains mostly unknown, but his violent criminal career soon made him well known. He joined the Hells Angels in the late 1960s, and his rise in the gang was driven by his ruthless behavior and strong belief in the club's violent code. Radke's criminal activities were many, including trafficking, extortion, assault, and even taking people's lives. He played a key role in expanding the Hells Angels, especially in controlling their territory and running illegal operations. Throughout his time with the club, Radke became known as one of the most violent and unpredictable members. His brutality wasn't just for survival, it was a way to show power and keep the club strong against rival gangs, law enforcement, and the public. One of the main events that cemented Radke's infamy was his role in the 1980s drug trade. He helped traffic methamphetamine, a major income source for the Hells Angels at the time. Radke's criminal activities brought him into the spotlight of law enforcement, especially the FBI, which was investigating organized crime. Over time, Radke continued his work with the Hells Angels, but eventually faded from public view. He passed away in 2013, leaving behind a legacy marked by the violence of organized crime and the dark history of the Hells Angels. And that's all for today. Thanks for watching.